so we're going to begin again. This will be a tough act to follow, but you know what? We've got some innovators here who are trying to save the world, so I think they're up to the challenge. So this session is called Combating Climate Change Through Sustainability, and it's become an increasingly important topic at Chicago Innovation, as it should for all of us, because climate change, it does not discriminate. It affects all of us on planet Earth. It's one of the biggest problems of our time, and so we're focused on innovation and talking about solutions that are going to impact us all. I want to tell everyone a little bit about this climate change initiative that we started earlier this year. It's three-pronged. It includes a public awareness campaign where we're promoting the needs, the issues, things that are going on in Chicago's climate change space. There's also a new award that we're excited about called the Climate Champion Award. So if any of you have a new product, service, process company that is innovating in response to climate change, be sure to nominate it. July 29th is the deadline. And then the last thing that we're doing through this new climate change effort is events and sessions and discussions just like the one today. And all of this is supported by a great group of sponsors and donors, one of which I see she's wearing her mask, but I'm going to make her blush underneath it. I just know that she will. Reverend Fellers, thank you. She was our first donor to help us launch this initiative. So please, round of applause for Reverend for helping to get us started. But more than that, she also brought in a lot of other great folks, and we have as well. So I want to recognize all of our supporters, some others who are here, including Mycocycle, Buoyant Ventures, NG, Shibui Ventures, the Lumpkin Family Foundation, the Walter Mander Foundation, Cindy Wither, Lynn Creighton, and Joanna Brett, and together have come together to support this new award, events like this, all the advertising we're doing, because we think it's really important to not only talk about the needs, but really also celebrate the innovators that have solutions, and that's exactly what this panel is about. So we are going to get started. If I can invite this group of speakers to come up to the stage to join me. We'll begin in just a moment, so give them a round of applause. And you know, it really is an amazing group of innovators who are a mix of entrepreneurs and investors and civic leaders who are innovating to combat climate change. So one at a time, I'll go down the road to introduce each of them. So Allison Myers to my right here, she flew in today for this event. She's the co-founder and general partner of Buoyant Ventures, which she started along with Amy Franchetic. And if you know, if she's working with Amy Franchetic, who's the former CEO of the Clean Energy Trust, she's got to be a big deal, because Amy's done a lot of great stuff, as has Allison. And it's an early stage venture fund focused on digital solutions for combating climate change. So thank you for being here. And then Joanne, who I got to know when she won a Chicago Innovation Award for Mycocycle. Mycocycle is a garbage-eating fungi company, which it's a pretty good first line in a cocktail party, I would say. She's also been a 2021 finalist at Fast Company's World Changing Idea Awards and is doing a lot of very exciting stuff, which we're going to hear more about. And then lastly to the right is Gary Cooper. He's the CEO and co-founder of Reaply, a fantastic startup in Chicago, though it keeps getting bigger every single year. In fact, he's recently raised $20 million, which is no small feat, so congratulations on accomplishing that. And we'll learn a lot more about Reaply, but it's an award-winning circular economy startup and also a 2021 Chicago Innovation Award winner. Also, Gary and Joanne were also ringing the NASDAQ bell on Friday to celebrate Chicago as a hub of innovation, so thank you for doing that. To get started, I want to direct the first question to our two entrepreneurs on the right there. You know, you're doing some fascinating things. You've been at it for a while. But what was the first seed of inspiration? Maybe tell the audience a bit more about Reaply and Mycocycle. Maybe starting with you, Gary.
I was going to start with Joanne.
Starting with Joanne.
Okay. First season, thank you for having me, first of all. This is awesome. First season of inspiration for Reaply. You see a problem, try to solve a problem. I had no idea I would ever be in technology. I'm a scientist. I think I was brought up to be thinking about Parkinson's disease in the brain, working in labs forever, and maybe accomplishing something 40 years later. But my lab at Northwestern was one of the most well-funded, and we had lots of resources that unfortunately we weren't using. And I would frequently go to lunch with other graduate students who were in smaller labs and who had less resources than we did. So I just thought about like, why aren't we sharing the things that we aren't using with other folks at Northwestern? And that's taken me on a journey to learn about the circular economy and to, try to be building a business that really helps make it on fire. So that's kind of what started everything.
Terrific. Thanks, Gary.
I have a similar start. There was a problem and a solution. I spent decades in construction products and building materials. I'm a former corporate director of sustainable and strategic initiatives, and we could not get our clients, like the federal government and colleges and universities, to zero waste. And it wasn't just the materials we made, but the materials the industry made. And happening at the same time, I was chairing green chemistry. I sat on the EPA panel for environmentally preferred purchasing, helping to set the standards for the federal government, and just looking at this kind of like these trains heading towards each other of needing to have greener, cleaner products, and then finding ways to dispose of our waste better, and nobody really taking action around it. And so I left my cushy corporate position, which sometimes I'm like, why? And started on this journey, but I really don't have any regrets about it. I'm learning and innovating every day, and it's great.
That's great, but I gotta ask, why and how fungi? Because when you're a kid and you get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't think a lot of people talk about being a fungi innovator.
When I left, and I call it my midlife crisis, I decided to invest in myself. I left, and I'm like, now what the heck am I going to do? And I'm a sustainability subject matter expert. I've been practicing in the circular economy and biomimicry and design for decades, and so I went into environmental consulting, and I took a course from Oregon State University in permaculture design. So I'm a certified permaculture designer. If you need anything, let me know. But I learned about mushrooms. Like, we're not really talking about mushrooms here in the Midwest, right? But you better believe in the Pacific Northwest they are. And they've been using them in environmental remediation cases for decades. And quite frankly, the fungi don't need us. They've been doing it for centuries without human intervention. And I put one and one together with what they're cleaning, these heavy hydrocarbons, like the materials that we were producing and disposing of, and Mycocycle was born.
Love it. And interesting, there's another fungi-related startup in Chicago called Nature's Fine. So I think Chicago is becoming the fungi innovation epicenter.
We call it the shroom boom.
The shroom boom. There you go. Here. All right, moving to you, Allison. So, combating climate change, obviously this is very much a mission-driven effort. People who are investing in this space will hear the term impact investing, and so clearly, being mission-driven is critical. What would you say is your mission, both professionally but also personally?
Yeah, I think for me as an investor, like what I'm truly doing is enabling and supporting like great people that are doing the super hard things, like these two that I'm sharing the stage with. But for me personally, it's really identifying that problem and then going and seeking out those that are solving for it. And whether that's personally or professionally, but ruthlessly going after like what is the best approach, what are the roadblocks, how can I help remove those? We do that with our portfolio companies and trying to be the most helpful investor on the cap table and saying, okay, how can I make this introduction? What can we walk you through in terms of a strategy session or something like that really enables all of the hard things to get done. But I'm a problem lover, but I love the solutions even more.
Yep, love it. Well, being a problem lover is important for being an innovator, because that's where innovation starts, with being excited to solve a problem. And going along the lines of being an investor, so Gary here as well is also an investor. Long Jump is a fund that he started, and I've known Gary for a little while. I've watched his journey and his career, and raising $20 million recently is a big accomplishment. But when you started, maybe you didn't know these things would happen in the future. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. Would be curious to hear from your perspective. How did the idea get incepted, and maybe share a bit about your journey. It's certainly no journey is a straight line. It's a wiggly line. It goes forwards. It goes backwards. It's circular. There you go. Hopefully moving forward though still at the same time. Maybe share a bit about how the evolution of your company and the evolution of you as an entrepreneur.
I think, first of all, took the commitment to learning. So when we started the company, my two co-founders were technologists, so they had been in tech their whole lives. I had not been. I'd done a brief stint at EY, so I kind of understood things in supply chain, but I really was a scientist. I mean, there's really no getting away from that. So my first thought was, I have to learn, and I have to learn fast, and I have to hire people who are committed to learning fast. So one of the things that I try to do, whether it's fundraising, our first fundraise to the last one, whether it's trying to work with a customer, from the first customer to the last one, is really can we increase our learning index? And so it's literally a part of the work that we do at Weekly, as a part of our core values. I think from a journey perspective, it's really been about trying best we can to execute against our promises, right? So when we promise something to a customer, when we say or pitch something to an investor, you know, there are macro things happen in the world that we can't control, but really, I think I've been really trying to be attuned to just fulfilling our promises as best we possibly can. And that has paid success. When you go from being a PhD in neuroscience to saying, I want to run a climate tech circular economy business, people don't take you seriously. So the first things you have to do is prove it to them. So the very first raise we did was painful. I raised $185,000 and it took me 10 and a half months to do so. And hey, I had a PhD. One of the reasons I helped co-found Long Jump is because I think that road to that first 100 grand should not be hard. But never mind that, I remember saying to investors when we raised that 185K, which included my mother and my aunt, was some of the folks in that first round, is that we would build one MVP, we would do one pilot, and hopefully this is a stretch goal, we would convert that pilot into a contract. So actually we were able to do that in the first 7 months. So then I could go back to those same investors with credibility, like, look, see what we did? We did what we said we were gonna do. Turns out that that set of investors didn't have any more money to put in the company. So I had to find net new investors and create net new trust. So I think really my journey has been one of trying as best I can to fulfill the promises that we made, trying to learn as fast as possible as I can, because circular economy is a burgeoning space. It's an old thing, but it's a new term and it's kind of in vogue right now. And by the way, the planet's burning. There isn't any time to wait around. So really it's just been leading with passion and trying to be as passionate as I possibly can and learning and trying to fulfill my promises.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Gary. So it sounds like you've had like a guiding star, you know, all throughout fulfilling promises and the like. Joanne, what's been your guiding star as an entrepreneur? You know, as in particular, someone passionate about sustainability.
Not failing people, that being my family for one, right? But not failing the people that I bring into orbit. I'm a solo founder, so very difficult. I didn't even know what a startup was. I joke that, you know, Evan Bayer, he's the CEO of EcoBeta, who's pretty well known in the space. And I've known him for quite a long time, and I reached out and I said, I have this crazy idea. He's like, send me your pitch deck and I'll get you connected. And then I Googled, what is a pitch deck? So, I mean, I didn't know what a pitch deck was. I didn't know what an incubator was, an accelerator. So I think for me, learning that part of it, learning quickly, everything's quickly. But the biggest thing is, you know, making these commitments to people that come in to work with us and seeing them through and being as strong and as zealous as I can be to make sure that as we go that next level, I can backfill the opportunity and being very transparent, you know, about the nebulous world of startup land and what this means. And so I have a host of willing folks that work really, really hard, that make me proud every day, and that's what I try to do for them.
That's great. And I guess the good and the bad is that there are so many challenges to solve. There's a lot of opportunities, but I guess that's the bad part too, right? There's so many needs, there's so many problems, there's so many issues. Maybe this is a question for all three of you, maybe starting again with you, Joanne. You know, why don't we see more innovation in the climate change space? Because there's, I mean, as you said, the world is burning. You'd think we'd all drop everything and commit ourselves, so let's all get on this team and help and support. But why are we not, should we be seeing more?
Until all the money in the world is burning, I'm not sure that we'll pay attention. It comes down to dollars and cents. I'm held to a different standard than other innovations. Waste management's a $1 trillion industry. It's super lucrative. Why would they want some chick rolling up with mushrooms eating trash, right? And on the flip side, we're creating a byproduct that can transform bio-based raw materials using, so circular, so reuse, monetizing the pathway. I think for me, it's really sticking to my guns and talking about the needs of both parts of this. And I know you guys face this too, that this isn't like, people say, oh, it's a two-sided business platform. You ought to just focus your efforts right there. And I'm like, no, I mean, one, if I'm gonna get paid to do it, and then I'm gonna get paid to sell it, why wouldn't I take the money? Like, how is that wrong? But the fact that it cuts carbon all the way around, I just think we have to really be clear and crisp about the monetization of what we're doing and how everybody's gonna make money. Oh, by the way, we'll have some place to spend it then, right? That would be a nice change of pace. So we have to be super candid about that.
Yep, good points. Allison, what's your take on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we look at sort of, money is not burning, though we are seeing a lot of risks in the forms of floods or climate disasters, and there are times where people quote numbers of, oh, it would take this amount of money to fix this, and this is what's wanted to be invested. It's like, do you know that that is what was damaged last year in some of the more serious storms that we've seen? And I think that change is really hard. And when you have everyday life that you're just trying to live and, see your friends, raise a family, take care of your parents, like all of the things that matter to us most in life, it takes some of these wildfires and climate disasters for people to be like really forced with the choice of, I gotta do something different. And I'm really proud of the business community and how they've started to really step up and acknowledge the risks that they're facing both personally and professionally and starting to move forward. But change is hard and takes time. I don't love that, to be honest. If I had a magic wand, there would be some different things that would be happening, but I don't, and no one does. And so I think it's really about, like what you were saying, focusing on what is the benefit that gets people to make a change that's really hard, and continuing to push on that button harder and harder, and then reminding people about all of the good things additionally that come on with that. I mean, on this stage in the last panel, for those of you that were here, everyone was talking about talent wanting a purpose. We see that so much, and I know you guys have people that are flocking to you because they want to work for companies that really have a purpose. And so surrounding it to both the investors and saying, this is how we're combating this and this is how we're going to make you a ton of money, and then saying to both your employees and customers, this is all the good that we're doing and this is all the other good reasons of why we're doing this. I think that is like the way that we get to solving this problem and people moving faster.
Yep, excellent points. And Gary, I saw you doing a lot of nodding over there. So I'd be curious to hear your take on this, especially since you have had success attracting people to join Reaply and attracting investors to Reaply. What are the messaging points, the ideas you're sharing that are getting more people excited to want to be a climate change innovator just like yourself?
I'm going to answer that, but I just have to piggyback on what John Houseworth saying, that I think one of the central issues is that there's so many things going on in the world right now that are also equally important. We just got out of a centuries pandemic. We are entering an unsure place in the market. If you look at the different kind of conflicts, geopolitical conflicts, there's a lot of things that's clouding our kind of attention. The one constant drumbeat is that the climate is getting worse. And no one follows me on Twitter, I'm the worst tweeter ever. But I tweeted the other day that the climate should be the top story in every newspaper every single day. So I don't think we have the attention to the problem. I think people who are living it, or people who have read about it, or people who have built careers in it, they know about it, and they're kind of coming into the fold and bringing their friends along. But I don't think a lot of people who are doing their job, trying to keep the lights on in their homes, really understand the severity of the problem and potentially the irreversibility of the problem. At a Reaply level, just like I think really any climate, I mean, I get so attracted to other companies I hear being built, including hers. I think there's two ingredients that we try to lead and try to attract talent with. The first is the problem space that we're trying to solve. There is money in the things that we don't use. They shouldn't be going to landfills. They shouldn't be going to long-term storage. They should be put into use back into the community somewhere. Recycling is not our answer to zero waste or to zero anything. So we lead first with our problem statement. But the second is we're gonna grow. As they talked about with learning is, we'll hire someone who's, let's say, a senior manager really, and give them a director level role and say, grow into that, learn that role. This is the first time I've ever been a CEO. I lean on so many people to give me their learnings about what the job is like and craft it in my own kind of way. I never had raised a round before until I was raising it, and I won't be raising the next round until I've raised it. So I think it's really about, for us, just really trying to give people agency and empowerment so they can learn and have impact, but then also just really plainly stating our why. Why are we all here? I left a really interesting space in Parkinson's disease to join something that I thought was existential. That's why I'm here, and that's what we kind of lead with when we're recruiting and hiring.
Yep, love it. Well, it reminds me of what the prior panel was talking about. It was giving people that sense of ownership over things and purpose and aligning on vision. And yeah, clearly you've all done a great job at doing that. Allison, one thing I'm curious about, so you have a history of investing in innovative companies, especially ones with potentially world-changing ideas. That's what like Boeing Ventures is looking to do. Just to share with the audience, what are some things that have really been extra inspiring to you that you've seen?
Yeah, just to reiterate again, so Buoyant is digital solutions for climate. So we look for software solutions, but sometimes some hardware that enables that software and new business models to help solve for both adaptation and mitigation. And we think both are really important. Adaptation, protecting lives and livelihoods; mitigation, how do we prevent the worst impacts from climate change. So there's so many cool things in this space, and some of them don't necessarily fit into Buoyant's thesis. One, I do love both of the groups, both of the startups that are on this stage with me, but to highlight some others, I think Audette is a company that we are super excited about that's in our portfolio. They're using satellite data and data sets to understand how buildings use energy from the outside in. So if you think about like the hard job of having to put boots on the ground, an expensive job, putting boots on the ground to do energy audits for every single building in a city, instead of really looking at the city as a whole or a real estate portfolio and saying, what is the top 20% that we should go target, and where would the most impact come from both energy savings and emission savings if we looked at that top group. So really prioritizing what can be done first and how do we get some of the easiest things done. But cool that all of a sudden we don't have to put boots on the ground and go into any building, but we can do that from the outside. We have another one solving an issue actually for Chicago called Storm Sensor, and they're putting sensors on the inside of water pipes and looking at building a digital twin for how water moves through water pipes to prevent urban flooding. So a lot of the flooding that happened during COVID, some of the sea level rises that we're seeing on the coasts, as well as even in the lake area here, we don't actually know how water flows through our pipes very well, particularly gravitational pipes. It's typically just depth of water. They don't track flow, and if you don't track flow, you actually don't know how much water is flowing through that. It's a scary realization, but some of those things that are like simple things that are being solved with these really cool new innovations and layering more and more data on top to help, as we spend the money in the infrastructure bill, how are we going to spend it most efficiently and really solve the problem for the populations that we're trying to solve for. But I'm also really inspired by the innovation within the community, in Chicago in particular. When Amy and I first met, I have, of course, knew of her work at Evergreen and the Clean Energy Trust, now Evergreen, and I'd worked in Chicago a ton with a lot of different clients in my consulting career. And it's that, I think, Midwest grit and work ethic that people talked about on the last panel that is so inspiring, as well as the community that comes in around climate. It's really collaborative, we're all after the same goal. Yes, there's competition because people have businesses, but it's really wonderful to see that in this space.
Yep. And I love your mention of communities. I think a lot of people who are here because this is a topic that was of interest to them. And so, since this audience is interested in the topic of climate change, what would be your thoughts on, what are certain big problems, if we were to try to prioritize, because climate change and sustainability is such those are big words, but if we were to try to dissect that down on a smaller levels, if you were to suggest, what's the most urgent problem within climate change? If you're looking to invest money towards solving, or maybe looking to join a company that's doing great things, what would you point to? Is it water? Is it energy? Is it
I'm going to go with nature-based solutions. We need more green space. It solves so much. Greenery is the best carbon cycler. It's the best water manager. It's the most regenerative. It brings the greatest peace of mind. And so for me, if we would invest in our public spaces, get rid of some of this concrete jungle, I think, is it Lynn that you spoke to the fatigue that people have? I think that you would start to see that paradigm shift, especially in cities that are just way, way too hot.
This is actually a question I could probably write a thesis about. I was just thinking about it, oh wow, what corner is he putting me in? Because I obviously would say waste is exactly the circular economy. I actually think, sitting here at least, the biggest problem is inertia. If one remembers, after we had the vaccines for COVID-19, there was a massive spending campaign that both the federal government underwent and some states underwent just to get people to take the vaccine. I think I recall in the state of Washington, they were giving a hamburger if you got vaccinated, maybe in the state of Oregon, a bit of weed if you got vaccinated. And hundreds of thousands of people were dying. And climate is kind of this silent, behind the scenes, slowly but fastly moving killer. So I think one of the things I would do is get the public sentiment, get the business community sentiment, get the political sentiment to where the science is, which is code red. So I think that's one of the things that people really just don't know about the problem.
Gotcha. So it's not handing out more hamburgers and weed, Well, I want to piggyback off of what you just said, Gary. So here's something interesting. Chicago Innovation did an event. It was called Innovations We Need Right Now. And I know you recall that. You were one of the panelists. It was a virtual event. It was in the throes of COVID, hence the virtual. That week, Russia had just invaded Ukraine, I remember. And so we asked the audience a question. What is the most urgent problem we need to solve right now? The categories were, it was related to COVID, nuclear war was an option, and 2/3 of the audience picked climate change. And I thought that was fascinating. But then, I guess it begs the question, if there's a desire, right, to be part of solutions, but maybe people just don't know either how they can make an impact in a meaningful way. What would be actionable tips or thoughts that you would share with people in terms of you care about this, you want to make a difference, maybe they're not all starting a company or investing in companies, what are other things people can do?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people can probably do most of is watch where their money's going, watching what your employer is doing. Both of those things, investors as well as employees of companies and customers of companies, are all putting a lot of pressure on companies today. And I think, as you think about the landscape, I could say energy represents this amount of emissions, transportation is this much, built environment is this much. But really what it comes down to is how do we do more with what we have today? I think that it is not just about building new things or taking things out of the lab and putting them, but really thinking about, and I think this is where Selfishly Buoyant loves to focus, is how do we layer like technologies and digital things that exist today on top of existing infrastructure so that we're more efficient with it, and we have to build less, and we can actually do more of that sustainable development that we've talked about in other panels. But I think really thinking about like how do you shift your mindset? A great thing I think that came out of COVID is there was all of a sudden this shift in your world, and it opened up everyone's minds to well, I guess we don't have to go to work. Maybe we can figure out a way to work from home. And it really got people thinking into new and different ideas. And I'd love for the world to be more in that place all the time to say, like, how could we do this differently? And I think in every part of your life, you can sort of ask that question about and relate it back to climate change.
I want to weigh in on this just a second, because I do think that I think that's part and parcel why there's some inertia around it, because it's the lack of accessibility to the solutions. And I think that we put too much burden on the populace to do, you recycle and, use your low flow toilet and turn your water off when you brush your teeth, when we need to be making these demands of, like, I don't know, the city of Chicago could have a commissioner of the environment again. How about that? Or we could stop shipping our waste off to Gary, Indiana. We can see large holders actually have immediate impact if they took the action. So I think it's both. I think we have to continue to educate the masses, and then you guys know what you're asking for and making demands of. We can continue to get our stories out there and gain the grassroots support. But at the end of the day, I mean, we need large conglomerates, large holders to actually take the action, because people will emulate what they see.
Excellent point.
And only to add to that, well, two things I'll add to that. One is a practical thing. There are like the New York Times climate section. There are periodicals, newsletters, newspapers, magazines, Twitter handles, Instagram handles that I now follow. If you look at my social media, it would be really weird. But it's all about climate. And I just get hit with this constant stream of information from people all over the world, writing their hearts out, thinking, there are lots of venture capitalists who dedicated their career to climate and are writing and thinking and speaking. And so there are many easy, digestible sources of information. So I'd say one step is just to get more informed. But I think more largely, we have to think of this as almost like an earth shot, like going to the moon again. And I've been writing about, the government almost establishing, if not establishing, something like the Department of Net Zero. Like, I really think it cannot be a political thing. It can't be one president's in, and we have a council, and they're doing some climate things, and then another president comes in, or a new mayor, or a new governor, or a new townsperson, and then all that policy, all the things that people have been poring over for years, all the businesses who are waiting on those policies to come through, just get changed because we've elected someone new. And the thing is, I think America has to lead here. It's not just to win that race, it's because these solutions have to be scaled in a place like America so they can be deployed in a place like India where they're even more needed, or Africa where they're even more needed, but they don't have the economies that we have here and the ability to pay for R&D and to innovate. So I think it's, for us, the common folk, to just find bits of digestible information to continue to learn. But for the leaders that we elect, we need to hold them accountable to year-on-end investment and focus on this problem.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it is a long-term issue, and by changing leadership so frequently, right? Imagine if there was a new CEO of Repley every year. How would the rest of your company
The sequoias will be burning 5 years from now.
Yeah.
The sequoias will be burning 10 years from now. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or
Right.
who's in the governors.
Yep. Well, I have a question related to the information we're getting related to this, but I'm gonna hold that question for right now because I want to go to the audience. It feels like a good moment to see who has some questions. So let's see, Paul, you've got the microphone. The gentleman in the white shirt, you were the first one to raise your hand, so we'll bring the microphone back there.
Thank you. So my question is, green energy, clean, sounds great, but the military doesn't use it. Why is that? So I'm with the military. My job is up on Bravo, so I kick on doors, get after bad guys. but I don't see the military using solar-powered jets, hydrogen-powered tanks, because it's not reliable, it's not dependable. Maybe that's why people don't fully invest in green technology. So also the military is big, everybody knows all the heroes, soldiers. So maybe that's why. If we get the military to go green, it can be effective, reliable, and dependable, maybe it'll make a bigger impact. So my question to the panel is, how could you convince Uncle Sam to go green?
Yeah, I am going to jump in here really quickly because we actually have a portfolio company called Shifted Energy. They focus on, as the name would suggest, shifting residential energy usage to when renewables are producing energy. This hot water heaters, other electric vehicle charging, all of this, use it as batteries within the house. And we actually have a meeting coming up with the DoD to talk about this being implemented within military housing, which we're really excited about because they need a ton of different upgrades to really help with how they're using energy overall. I would argue as well that there's a ton of really cool innovation going on within the military in pockets. And in areas, I think large deployment is always difficult, and I think when you're talking about the safety of soldiers and thinking about like the goals that they have stated, tried and true, and something that's even harder to change from one technology to another. But in the military as a whole, I've seen a lot of really cool innovations working in the South with some of the bases on what they're focused on and how they're innovating, and expect a lot more to come out of it.
I was going to say, we just completed a large pilot with the Army at Fort Campbell. We're setting up for a 5-year project at Fort Hood. I think they probably operate in silos of excellence, but if it's encouraging to know that the DoD does have sustainability goals and metrics, they're really driving for net zero carbon by 2030 in alignment with many other agencies and American Institute of Architects. So you see a bunch of these companies and conveners influencing each other. So there is some hope. I would agree with you, though, a large holder. And more importantly, I've seen some of these implementations take place overseas prior to happening here. And sometimes it's just a lack of willingness based on who's at the White House as to what gets done in a timely manner.
I would only add, so we work with the U.S. Air Force as well, the NIH. Having said that, I think that the place where the federal government can play immediately, even in theaters, even in the armed forces, is their purchasing power. The federal government is the biggest purchaser in maybe the world, I don't know it, but definitely in the United States. And what they can start requiring is people to tell them more about the things that they're purchasing. Just simply tell me how much carbon went into producing this. Tell me how much emissions will come for this if I use it. Just help the government understand its own impact. So I think before we get to deploying large-scale pieces of net new innovation in theaters of war, I think we first need to think about what's our exposure. And because of their purchasing power, they could on a dime have every vendor have that, but they don't.
Well, it sounds like with perspectives like Gary's and pilots like what you're doing and portfolio companies like you have, it sounds like change is coming. Might be slow, but directionally, hopefully it's heading in that direction. Let's do one more question before I'll go back to some of mine, and then we'll go back to audience questions too. I see we've got another hand right here.
Actually, a great bridge for Drunken Funeral again. It's the communication problem. The government doesn't know. The DoD is by large the biggest funder. The Defense Innovation Unit reports directly to the Pentagon and they write deals. We're actually involved with this with microgrids. Those who don't know microgrids is the cell phone, what the cell phone did for the telecom landline, the microgrids do for the energy industry. This deal is happening now. It's an open deal. We're in the middle of negotiating the application for it with partners in the industry. It's a communication problem. Now I want to tie this back to the great comment, Gary, you had, and Alison with the grassroots effort. We need to connect policy. When I met Jagger Shah in the 2014 after Cylinder killed investments for hardware, I said, Jagger, what's the problem? He said, investment is not the problem, it's policy. Now what can any one of us on the grassroots level do to change policy? Because policy, California and New York, the states, drive policy. Illinois can do the same. How can we force popular, not motivate the populace to influence the governor of Illinois. It's very outspoken. It's great to be in Chicago, by the way. What can we do to impact policy locally right here?
Work with the Illinois Environmental Council. They're one of the most active lobbying arms in the state of Illinois. They helped get CEJA and FEJA passed, and they're fierce. And I think that you have to bring like all 5 fingers of the hand together to really drive that. But I mean, like right there in this state, the Illinois Environmental Council, all day long, my money's on them.
And I would just add to my previous comment, when I say that there should be, you should ask yourself these questions. Like, I'm also saying in your place of work and business, this is what a lot of questions and employees are asking themselves of their own companies. So I would even encourage you to challenge your leadership, or if you're leadership yourself, getting involved with something like that.
Terrific. Well, I want to also then, question I have, this builds off of one of the things you had said, Gary, before. You're talking about the stream of information that you're getting. So everyone here, since you are here, since we know you care about this topic, you're aware that it is a man-made or humankind accelerated problem. There's people outside these walls. Not everyone is on the same page about the problems. And it makes you want to like smack your head when you hear that, because it's like, how can we progress? The irony is that it affects whether you believe or don't, you're impacted. How can we, well, I guess here's the question. What are common misconceptions about climate change that need cleared up?
I'll maybe to add to build off of what Gary said earlier, there's no vaccine. There's no silver bullet. Superman is not coming. Like, we have to figure this out. Like, and I think the more we talk about climate risk, the more we talk about what's at stake. I think that that's one way to talk about it. Sometimes it comes off as, or is labeled as fear-mongering, which is not true. It's terrifying. But I think that that's the biggest misconception, at least, and I'm not always sure how to structure the communication right, but climate risk does seem to resonate more across different groups.
Yeah, actually, I think the same thing. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's solvable, like that. It's gone. And Joanne could build a massive big business. Reaply can become a great success, and we still not get there. And 100 other climate entrepreneurs could also build great businesses, and we still not get there because we didn't figure out the Indian-Africa problem. Like, how do we take and transplant the technology? It's so multifaceted that I think it's maybe the easiest thing ever to get wrong, which is exactly why having what I call small bits of trusted information that you can kind of get your head around really starts the journey for any person. And by the way, I maybe this is my journey, but I think it's also yours because I know your story, is that in getting those small bits, people start to go, man, I should start working in that space. I should be an investor. I should be a lawyer. I should be a writer. I should be an entrepreneur. I should go join someone's company. I should go join a big company who's trying to reinvent their company. Because as you start to learn about the problem, you are moved to be like, what can I do that I'm not doing today, tomorrow, to make this problem a little bit better? It will really take all of us, maybe even more, some machines, some AI things, to solve this. And so I think the really big misconception is that it's digestible, that it's easy elucidated. I mean, every day I learn something about climate that I didn't know. Every day I'm fascinated or depressed by a stat that I didn't recognize. One thing I learned, and I sat on a panel with the governor recently at MHub, was that in COVID, we mobilized 14% of global GDP to, quote, solve COVID. 14%. It's estimated that we'll need to mobilize 2% of global GDP to solve climate. And yet we're not doing it. We're not doing it. So to me, it's like, even stats like that just blow me back, and I'm learning every day, and I just wish that people take their own journeys of learning and I think it will land us all in a better place.
And I was going to say, I think until we're all personally inconvenienced, it's not like walking from the parking deck over on Lincoln over here and melting. Okay, I think you got to go back to the 90s when people died during the worst heat wave we had in Chicago. It's looking at the tragedy of the deaths that will happen in Texas as they use more energy than 3 states combined in one day. It's going to be, you know, and it's not going to be us in this room. It's going to be folks that take public transportation and they have to wait outside for the bus and they're getting heat stroke by the time they get to the job that they work outside. And I would say that one of the best resources on the health crisis, and maybe it's reframing the climate crisis to be a health crisis, because that really is what it is the American Public Health Association. They have the best library on the adverse impact of climate change, especially to urban communities. And so I would just say, in the vein of knowledge, go and access their information. But it's really, until we're personally inconvenienced, or we're facing people in our family dying in mass, the same as COVID, that will, I think, really pay attention and mobilize, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, in a way, this brings me back to Chicago, because I think we're kind of blessed, right? Like Chicago, very close to a giant freshwater lake. You know, we don't have wildfires. We don't have a lot of these issues and things that people in other states experience. And I see someone nodding their head, thinking about California probably for a moment, which is what I'm thinking about. And there's people in lots of states where this is so much more than when your home burns down. That goes way beyond inconvenience. So, you know, and at the same time, Chicago is, you know, becoming a hotbed of, you know, businesses and startups and big companies focused on sustainability. There's all these Fortune 500 companies that now are doing things differently. There's startups, there's new investors, there's lots of things. You know, my question is, you know, why is Chicago becoming a good place to start a sustainability-focused business? And if you're interested in this and you haven't dove in yet, you know, how would you recommend kind of navigating the sustainability ecosystem here in Chicago?
Well, I mean, like you said, day one, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, I mean, I now have an ecosystem around me. I see some familiar faces out here of support, and it's always a phone call away. So I think this is a safe spot. Everybody's been where I was. Everybody is where Gary was. Even from the investor perspective, everybody is where, you know, Amy and Allison were, and we get to emulate that. And so I think that's one. I think if you have the idea, I think you have to consider taking that leap of faith and investing in yourself. And that was the trigger for me. Like, why am I continuing to just put up with this BS day in and day out? I'm just greenwashing for this large corporation. There's solutions out there that we can get to. And so it was I was fortunate, though, to be able to invest in myself. So I think incubate your idea, talk to the people around you, encourage people that you know that have a great idea, help them out. I mean, I want the $20 million. I'm not there yet. I'm raising my seed round, and we'll get there. But it doesn't have to take that much to get the idea out there. And so maybe just give it that first step. That's the best way to go. And you have a supportive community here.
I mean, I'm a flag bearer for Chicago and building businesses in Chicago. You know, so I'm on the board of P33 in 1871. I'll say, from a climate perspective, why in Chicago? Chicago, the most diverse economy in the United States, the biggest, most diverse economy in the United States. No industry has more than 20% market share of GDP here in Chicago, which means there are, from food to aviation to the university systems, there's just a diversity of people to sell to, if you're thinking about it from a B2B perspective. It also is a microcosm of the United States. If you think how diverse our population is, the different types of jobs that people do. But beyond that, there's some like fundamental things that are awesome about Chicago. We graduate, from a technologist perspective, we graduate the second most amount of CS computer science undergraduates each year in the state of Illinois. They tend to go to California or New York or Boston. We're trying to do things at P33 to keep that from happening. But there are people who are raised here, educated here, who be ripe to work in climate tech companies or clean tech companies. We have lots of industry who are looking for those solutions. And through Allison and her partners work and a couple of other firms, we're having big venture come to Chicago and invest in companies at the earliest stages to kind of really get those things going. And then lastly, I think our special sauce is just who we are, Midwesterners and kind of community. We're not Valley, we don't cut throat, right? We don't steal an engineer from another person's company. We help each other, and we talk with each other because in my mind, if she's successful, that just means one less bits of waste and one less bits of carbon that we have to find our way out of in order to solve the climate issue. So I think there's, a multi-factored reason, but I think the diversity of the people, the economy as well.
And I'll build off that to say, as an investor, I love to invest in companies that are actively already solving a problem with a customer in mind. And that diversity that you talked about in terms of, when you solve for climate, a lot of times you're solving for a wide range of industries. And instead of having to go to different parts of the country to find all of them, having them all right here is really useful. And a lot of them, the ag tech, battery technology is being developed both in Chicago as well as manufactured in the state of Illinois. Motor City isn't too far away. Like all of those are really relevant to what is trying to be solved for and some of the bigger problems that we've talked about. And then I will also say the talent here is amazing. Chicago Booth, Northwestern, Kellogg. I will even plug Michigan as my own. That we have a ton of people that come to Chicago. They don't go to the coast necessarily. But they have great sustainability programs, and we've found fantastic resources. We just hired one from Kellogg the other day, so thrilled for that, yeah.
There you go. I remember seeing Mayor Rahm Emanuel for many, many years saying Chicago's the capital of the Midwest in just about everything. Indeed, that's true. So I'm not surprised to see that it's becoming that way in climate change innovation as well. So I have one last question. Before I ask it, I just want to see, is there another question from the audience? Anyone that we also haven't heard from today? Let's go, Revan.
Well, I've heard so many wonderful things today, and I think what concerns me most is the inertia. What concerns me the most is breathing is bipartisan. I don't understand why there can't be consensus on something that is coming up from the edges on all of us, and why we don't see this. Because it happened to me in an occasion that I felt a visceral response to what was going on in terms of melting glaciers, in terms of the fires, in terms of the air we breathe and particulate matter that is going to affect all of us in terms of public health. And I see some things that are optimistic, such as using the grids from the coal-powered plants to then go into cleaner energy. That's great, but it's about jobs, it's about money, and if people can be persuaded that by going into some of these new entrepreneurial occupations, they can earn the money that they used to earn in dirty fuel, that's something that has to be a political thing. It has to be a combined political thing, both sides working together. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
So to summarize, for people in the back, in case you couldn't hear as well, to summarize, I guess, why the inertia? And what can we do in a way to bring people from both sides of the aisle and all walks of life to have consensus and to come together to address this?
I was just going to say, the last question, why climate tech in Chicago, I specifically didn't say why a sustainability business in Chicago. I said a business in Chicago because I think regardless of what you're building, you need to have these principles of sustainability and climate embedded in it. And I think once we maybe stop using the label maker to say that's a climate tech, and then someone says, ooh, that's scary, I don't understand that, that's new technology, and how about we just say, this is a technology that has grown from 5 employees to over 50 to 100. It's venture backable and he's growing. You know, so once we just go by the numbers of the economic development, and I'll kind of go back to the dollars and cents. People want to see companies that make money and build a strong foundation here. Oh, and we happen to impact the climate as well. And so I think, for me, I think that's why, I mean, we have to be careful that we don't paint ourselves into that same box, that we're just this kind of technology when we're building a business that happens to check that box.
I 1,000,000,000% agree with what she just said. And my comment is exactly what she just said with just a few different words. I just submitted, I don't know if it will be accepted, an op-ed to the New York Times, my first ever, called the everything crisis. Because I think, to your question, if I were to say to you, you know, we have this thing called the climate crisis, choose that or choose your job. Or we have this thing called the climate crisis, choose that or your current business model. People are gonna choose their jobs. People are gonna choose their business models. The problem is, it's not framed in my mind the right way. It's not about the climate. Yes, the climate is changing. It's really about everything else that's changing because of it. The climate crisis is a food crisis. It's a water crisis. It's a housing crisis. It's a jobs crisis. It's a finance crisis. It's literally an everything crisis. And I think if we position it like, no, you can have more jobs in a greener economy. No, you can have better jobs in a greener economy. No, you can have less food scarcity, less homelessness, less water problems, less whatever it is in a green economy. You maybe start to shift this kind of corner going that people do when you're like putting them against their job or putting them against their business model or putting them against their whatever they do in their current day lives. The honest truth is we have to change almost everything. And when you change almost everything in 5 or 10 years, people go to their corners. And so I think we just have to reframe a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of this is, solar is the biggest job generator within the energy industry. Retrofits are a huge job generator within the construction business. Like, these are things that we should be talking about in different ways, and it's a really great reminder that I think sometimes we shortcut into kind of climate language. When, I think, Reaply could probably be considered a fintech company, because actually you guys are just saving everyone money. This is really what you could be, in its financial transactions across a platform in one way or another. So, fixing how we change, and I think we fall into this because sometimes it is so overwhelming to talk about all the different long list of issues that it almost is just like, well, climate sums it up. But it's a great reminder that we need to be talking about the risks associated, the opportunity associated, and we also, for better or worse, have to pay attention. I personally have very close family members that pop my bubble all the time on the language that's coming from other groups, and really listen to that and think about, okay, how do I talk about this in a way that circumvents what the message is coming across there? Because while unhelpful, being aware of it is important.
Great. And to end, I've got one final question. So one sentence answer though. And the question is, what is one thing that gives you optimism for the future of our planet right now?
I can go first. I can go first.
Well, Gary just reminds me, I took scuba diving lessons, and I remember learning that what do you do if a shark's coming? You stab your buddy, and then, you swim away.
So I'll take the dagger. I am so excited about the talent in the space and the community being built. I think Chicago Innovation is a really great example of that. We are thrilled to support you all. But I think the more people that are interested in this, the more people that see the impact. That wasn't one sentence, but talent.
I echo that, and I would say what makes me super excited is seeing people want to come into this knowing that it's difficult, like the enthusiasm and the energy, and even the new solutions. I think coming to Realm, and I think as a community we have to be quick to understand that it's not going to be 100% perfect. Like, our kids aren't perfect when they're, well, of course they are, when they're born, but they can't walk, right? So they're going to fall sometimes. The same with new technologies, and we have to be there to help them. So I love the enthusiasm that I'm seeing, not only in the workforce, but in the initiation of new ideas.
Those are amazing. I messed up. I agree with Allison with talent. But I would say second to that, people like me and people like you. I'm a neuroscientist, and I'm talking here today about climate and been working at our company for about 7.5 years, and you're here to listen. That gives me hope.
Love it. Great note to end on. Please, round of applause for our fantastic panelists here today. And in closing, I also want to thank the Executive Club for being our partner. And seeing all the Executive Club's members that are here, the Chicago Innovation audience as well. Thank you for coming and listening and contributing and being a part of this community movement. We hope to see you at future events. We've got our In-Gala on August 11th. We've got our nominee celebration on September 21st. Save the date of November 16th. It's the Chicago Innovation Awards, where we will honor a new organization with our new Climate Champion Award. Remember, you can nominate by July 29th, so that's coming up soon. And lastly, outside those doors, we've got drinks, we've got food. I also want to point out, because I knew who the speakers were, that today, for the first time, we hope to make this a continued thing. We're using reusable containers out there, not ones that can be thrown out. So we're trying to do our part. We can all do our part in little ways. So thank you all.